Hey everybody, it's Mark Pattison back again with another phenomenal and inspiring episode of Finding Your Summit, all about people overcoming adversity and finding their way. And this week, I found myself as the main guest, and I've also brought in my close friend, BFF, and training partner, Jim Mora. But before we get to that, I just want to let everybody know that if you want to follow the journey, you can do that on my website, www.markpattisonnfl.com. I will have a link from Garmin that you can actually see my track going up and down the mountain. And hopefully I'll be able to post from 17,500 feet, which is our base camp, which we will be making that and calling that home for about 2 months. Incredible. And also on there, there's another a cause that I'm going after right now called Emilia's Everest. That is my daughter trying to overcome epilepsy. We've raised about $23,000 to date as we broadcast this episode. And there's a link that takes you directly to the National Epilepsy Foundation. And on that link, you can donate and trying to solve this for her and also give more awareness towards this disease that's out there. So on that note, let's start with this pod. So about 30, 40 episodes ago, I did a thing called a solo cast. And on a solo cast, it was just essentially me talking about the journey, where I've been, where I'm at, and where I'm going. And now as I am literally on the verge of leaving for Mount Everest, there's just a lot that I wanted to take a time out. I wanted to reflect. I wanted to bring Jim into the conversation and just us have a back and forth on why I'm doing this and how I got here again. And there's some parallels, I think, in terms of what he's doing in terms of his coaching search that's out there right now in life after football and what's next for him. So, whether you're climbing mountains like I'm doing, whether you're coaching football or some other pursuit in your life, I think this conversation applies to everyone. So first of all, Jim, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me on for the third time. And this would be fun to talk about.
Yeah, so, I think this thing is probably going to go all over the board, and there's going to be a lot of zigzagging. But I think, I just want to reset kind of where I was at.
You want me to reset it for you?
Well, yeah, from your perspective, why don't you go for it?
Well, my perspective, I've known Mark for a long, long time. We actually met in our senior year of high school in the summer before we went to University of Washington. He was working at Bob's Big Boy.
No, Burgermaster, man.
Burgermaster in Seattle. And we would go throw the football around with Steve Pallure, who was going to be the quarterback at Washington. So I've got a long history with Mark, and we roomed together and a lot of things. But I think this whole thing with Everest started when he was going through some changes, some extreme changes in his life. Was going through a separation and then divorce, was struggling with his daughter Emilia, who he mentioned earlier, and her bout with epilepsy, which he's working hard to overcome. And he was in a point in his life that wasn't real bright at the time. And Mark's always had a very positive outlook on things. But at that point in time, I think it was hard to not feel a woe is me attitude. But I think Mark was able to take a step back, as he says, as he was walking Theo around the block and say, Theo's his big chocolate lab, English lab, just a great dog. And they were in Santa Monica. He'd walk him around the block, and he was always saying, how did I get here? How did I get here? How did I get here? And then I think one day he decided to change that narrative from how do I get here to what am I going to do to get out of here. And get out of here means that darkness that was kind of enveloping his life. And I remember when it all kind of came crashing down, and he showed up at my doorstep with his pillow and his suitcase and
toothbrush
and moved into our house for a while as he was trying to recalibrate. And it was a low point, and then he moved into an apartment or kind of a duplex, and it was really tough. But he always maintained this positive attitude, and he came up with the concept of climbing the 7 summits and being the first NFL player to do so. And it became much more than just a concept. I think it became a way out of, a very challenging time for you. And I think what's most impressive to me is, and it doesn't surprise me, it's impressive is how you stuck to it. Because I think a lot of people would start the journey, would get to a better spot like you did, and then might say, I'm okay now. I'm good now. But your will to complete the journey, to complete the 7 summits, to keep pushing for Emilia, to find your way out of the darkness, to invite happiness back into your life, to completely restructure everything about yourself has been inspiring. But anyone that knows Mark would understand what I'm saying, because he's incredibly positive about everything. It's never a can't, it's always a can. It's always, I can do this, we can do this, you can do this. He told me a long time ago, and it's something that sticks with me all the time, is action creates reaction. And when I've been stuck in my holes and my slumps, he never commiserates with me. He always says, well, get out there and do something about it. You know, if you're just going to sit around and lay around on the couch and feel sorry for yourself, nothing good's going to happen. So action creates reaction. But his action has created a real chain reaction now that it's leading him to what I believe will be a successful up and down from Everest, and a successful completion of this quest for Emilia's
Everest.
Well, I think what you're talking about, thank you for all that. I think one of the things you're talking about is just being stuck. And really for me, I didn't have the skill set and the tools to really understand what it takes to power through and put big goals until Coach James, our legendary Hall of Fame coach from the University of Washington. You know, there's a lot of guys. It's a little bit different today with players because they're in club sports during high school. We have one of our best friends, Hugh Millen. He played 10 years in the NFL. He was our starting quarterback at the University of Washington. And now he's got 2 sons. One's a full-ride quarterback, full-ride scholarship quarterback down at the University of Oregon. He's got another one who will be a senior in high school next year. And both those kids are big and they're strong and they're tall and they really know the game. They study film and they're in the weight room. And they're doing all these things that I never had to do. And I never had to do them because, one, nobody else was doing them. We weren't advanced that far. And it was just a whole different time when it wasn't so competitive beyond just the play field on the game day that you're playing Little League. And that was it, right? And so it was truly you're playing those 3 sports, baseball, basketball, football, and you just keep rotating these different seasons. And when I got to the University of Washington, I quickly understood that being 181 pounds, 6'2", couldn't bench my weight, wasn't fast enough to compete, and looking at all these other guys on the team who were former high school All-Americans, but they're big and strong and confident, it just really rocked my world. And I remember sitting I was in this room in a fraternity, Fiji House, and I just locked myself in there for about 8 hours, and I cried, and I went through all the emotions of just like, where was I going in my life? And it was a really defining moment, even though there wasn't any kind of certainty about the eventual outcome, just like this 7 summit journey I've been on. There was no certainty. The one thing I could do was work my ass off and get after it and do the things that I needed to do to put myself in a position to maybe one day be able to play and to start and put myself in a position to be drafted, play in the NFL.
Well, how about the parallels between what you're just saying right there and what you have taken on since really your divorce and now your final summit in this quest for the 7 summits, Everest, is that you basically locked yourself in a room. And as you were talking right there, the word that came to my mind is relentless. Like, you're relentless and you go after it. And, you know, I've hiked with you, I've skinned with you, I've mountain biked with you, I've done it all with you. And when you watch Mark's pace, it's a relentless pace. Like, some people walk up a mountain and some people attack a mountain. Mark attacks a mountain. Now, when he gets on Everest, he will be paying respect to Everest, but he will be in a mode where, he's being safe, he's being smart, but he has a relentless attitude, and that's what you've always been, is relentless. And you just talked about it. That's the word that came to me, is relentless.
Well, I think I thank you. But again, I don't want to take credit. Like, I just, I fell out of a tree and that happened.
Coach James had a big effect.
The big effect really was Coach James, his adaptation to John Wooden's Pyramid of Success.
Right.
You coached at UCLA, and there's that Wooden Center, and it's got all the different trophies and everything else that he accumulated. And it's just amazing to walk in there and see the accomplishments. But it was a 25-cell block of individual and team goals to ultimately get you to the final peak of the
His
world,
definition
the
of success.
Yeah, exactly.
Which was the success is a peace of mind, which is the direct result in knowing you did your best to become the very best you are capable of becoming. He never says anything about being the very best. He talks about being your best. That's what he defines success as, and that's what I think you do all the time.
Yeah, and of course you don't go from Mount Si
you
or
go
something
from point 1 to, like you said, point 25.
It's a process,
top, right?
And you have to, and sometimes that process for all of us, again, going through divorce, going through a job change, going through, like my situation, your situation of being separated, leading to divorce, breaking up the family. I mean, it's awful. And we all need to have something that's really going to pull that weight to get us out of that place that it's dark and it's scary and there's uncertainty, and you start going through all the fear of what if. And what I found probably more than anything is by stepping into the fear, because I was scared as hell, by stepping into the fear, the amazing gifts that have come to me. And you mentioned a couple of them, and one of them, certainly from the mountains, has been, all the mountains have done has cost me money, right? It's cost me to go around and fly over the world and climb these different mountains. I have a large social following and everything, but I don't make a penny off any of this. And so it hasn't been about that. So when I start talking about gifts, I'm not talking about monetary, like somebody's going to sponsor me for $1 million to go hold a flag on top of it. That hasn't happened. It's okay, because the gifts of seeing the inspiration of others, maybe getting off the couch and doing something great. You were recently involved in Emilia's Everest. We threw a program in Sun Valley, Idaho, January 3rd. We had Peter Cetera, yourself, Rebecca Rush, Tom Flick, another NFL quarterback, Peter Whitaker, a mountaineer that climbs all over the world. They were all there to support and help. We raised $23,000, right? And we're trying to get to $29,000.
We will.
We're only $5,000 away to get Emilia to her summit. But again, I couldn't have pulled off that event to try to help my daughter if I hadn't stepped into the fear. I hadn't created this platform where I've got 400,000 people following the journey, which then I went around to these different vendors in town to see if they'd donate a ski lift ticket or a wax for their skis or a down jacket or something to help participate in having a full house at night. It was incredible.
Well, I think one of the things that makes your journey different than some. Now, some people climb because it's a passion. You talk about Peter Whitaker, it's in his family, it's their lifestyle, it's what they've always done. I think some people take on the challenge of the 7 summits or Everest because they want to be able to say they did it. And then I think there's people like you that do it for a real, on a spiritual level, a real purity. It started with this concept of, finding your summit, climbing out of a tough time in your life. And so it's pure. It's not manufactured. You're not doing it for money. You're not doing it for hype. Certainly, all of us have to earn a living, and building a brand and doing those things are important, but at its core, it's genuine. And I don't know that that's always the case. I also think it's really interesting how you talk about Coach James. And, I've been through my trials. I've been sitting here now for 2 years without a head coaching job. I love to coach. And one of the reasons I love to coach, and every time you talk about Coach James, it takes me into my own mind, am I that Coach James to somebody like you? And I am. And that is what's so rewarding about coaching. I want to just tell a quick story because I think it reflects or relates to what you're saying. I had a young man named Cody Ennis when I first got to UCLA, and he was about a 320-pound offensive lineman. And he wasn't a very good player, but he was an amazing person. He had this very strong will. And I tried to get him to transfer because I wanted him to go have a chance to play football. He was never going to play at UCLA. I had a conversation with him. I said, Cody, it's best for you to transfer so you can go to a smaller school and actually play in games. And he was in my office the next morning at 6:30, and he didn't say, okay, I'm going to transfer. He didn't say, tell me how to play. He said, tell me how to help this team win, which was amazing because it was this sacrifice that he was willing to make to help the team win. He knew he wasn't going to play. Well, long story short is Cody went from a 310-pound offensive lineman to a 185-pound now in his third year as a member of the U.S. Navy SEAL teams. And I just got a text from him.
Is that right?
Yeah. And I got a text from him 2 days ago. It's a picture on my phone. I screenshotted it. He's in a helicopter. He's on deployment, I believe, in Afghanistan. And he goes, Coach Mora, I just want to thank you so much for shaking the sickness of complacency from me when I got to UCLA. I'd never be where I am now without that. And it just meant so much to me. It's just so rewarding. I mean, it's I think more rewarding than, the first round draft picks that I've had, to see a guy like Cody grasp the concepts of sacrifice and work ethic and having a high standard and what it meant to be a winner, and a lot of things that I work off Coach James every day when I'm coaching, same thing, but it was fun to see that happen. So
I want to do a parallel, and I want to come back to this because it's really interesting. I think at the end of the day, and at the very top of the rung for John Wooden's pyramid of success is this thing called competitive greatness. And in order to have competitive greatness, you really have to love the process because for me, it took me 3 years of darkness. I didn't know that I'd be able to play in the game and catch the winning touchdown against Michigan, and then I had a lot of other great moments. But it was a lot of nights of running up and down those stairs at Husky Stadium in the rain, in the dark, with no cameras, no lights, nobody, and I had no clue what was ahead of me, other than I can only do what I can do for that particular day. And so, again, I think the parallel is, I want to hit on a couple of points here, is, again, loving the process. I'm not trying to climb the 7 summits, and with Everest being the kind of the grand finale, because I need to have a big trophy or be applauded in some unique way. As you know, because we're doing it, every single day, every single morning, I get up, feet on floor, out the door, brush my teeth, and I'm working out. And I do 2-a-days. And you got to love working out. Most people don't like to work out. That's why it's working. You're working out. You're not playing out, right?
Right.
And so
you're not exercising.
No,
you're working out.
No.
Right.
And we go hard, and we go a long way. And,
do.
every night we go skinning up the mountain. But I at the end of the day, I'm not saying this because I'm here to brag, and you have the same mindset.
Yeah, you don't
You're
brag.
not there.
You're not a braggart.
No. But at the bottom, the point being is, it's not about standing on top of the mountain. It's about the 364 days that lead up to it that I love. That's my passion. Right?
The process. You're in love with the process, and people that are in love with the process find success. And people that are committed and relentless like you, they find success because they're doing it for the right reason. And what you've done, Mark, over and over is, and you said it, the top pyramid on John Wooden's pyramid of success is competitive greatness. And his definition of competitive greatness was being at your best when your best is needed or required. Some people say required, but he said needed. And you, engaging 100% in the process is going to get you to the point where when your best is needed, which is to take those final steps, in this case, and you've been in situations a lot where your best was needed, you're going to be ready. It goes back to the Michigan game when you caught the winning touchdown pass that was in Sports Illustrated that we have the picture of, is if you hadn't have ran all those stairs, and if you hadn't have sat in your room for 8 hours and cried and came up with a plan for how you were going to work your way out of, a little bit of a challenge, you wouldn't have been ready to jump up and catch that ball in the southeast corner of Husky Stadium and make the winning catch when your team needed it because you followed the process. That's what it's about. And so you said it, there's 25 blocks, right, to get to the top. You don't just get to the top. You got to follow that process, and that's what you do.
I want to talk really candidly about what happens when you don't follow that process, right? And in this case about Mount Everest, it's a life and death situation. So I was down in 2019. I was in Antarctica, early January. And my tent mate was a guy by the name of Don Cash. And Don Cash was a guy that was from Salt Lake City, big family, Mormon, worked in software, had a bunch of big wins, bunch of money. And so he was on this kind of sprint to do the 7 summits. And so 3 months after coming back from Antarctica with me, which we successfully made the summit, but he had a lot of challenges down there. And by the way, 6 months before that, we happened to be, I didn't know him at the time, but we happened to be on Denali. He summited 3 days before I summited, but they had to fly him off the top because he got frostbite and lost 3 fingers, part of his nose and toes. 3 months later now, he's going off to Mount Everest. And for him, I didn't get the sense that he ever loved the process.
Right.
And he was just there because he loved doing this. He had this quote that he always had about epic shit. That was his quote unquote tagline. And he had this certain stance that he'd pose and take these pictures. And it was more about that and the t-shirt and about impressing his friends about, look, this cool stuff I can do. But he didn't love the process, right? And so at the end of the day, last year when they got in all those lines, he hadn't loved the process enough. He went with the cheapest operator that's up there on the mountain, and he lost his life. He got to the very top, raised his hand after 19 hours, of which you should be up and back in your tent at 26,000 feet in about 12 hours, and he was on a one-way ticket. 19 hours, raises his hands, falls over, and that's it. And again, it doesn't always result in death, but if you don't, again, love the process and do the work and you're authentic about what you're trying to do, bad things can happen. Now, let me tie this back to again, I think, from my perspective, because I've been around you for so many years and your dad, also a long time, 19, 20-year head football coach, right? Mm-hmm. And you've just always authentically loved the process. You love studying from, the greats. You've applied many different principles from all these different coaches that you've been around, from different head coaches. I mean, I know you didn't become a head coach just, obviously out of the gate. You spent, 18 years as assistant coach, 6 teams, right?
The Chargers. Well, let's count Washington, right?
Yeah.
Graduate assistant or student assistant, not even a graduate assistant,
yeah.
student assistant, and then the Chargers.
My senior year, I redshirted. You didn't. My senior year, my redshirt senior year was your 5th year in the program, and since you'd already graduated, then you became an assistant.
I just started
assistant.
helping and cutting up film and doing all the, making sure there was coffee and doing all the dirty work, but I loved it. Then I went to the Chargers, and I spent 8 years there. Don Coryell hired me. And essentially my very first job there was to make sure that I got the coach's dinner every night, to make sure that the refrigerator was full of Diet Coke, to make sure that the copier machine had paper in it. And it didn't seem like a sacrifice to me. Let me just go back. So I use the word sacrifice. I don't like the word sacrifice. I like the word commitment as opposed to the word sacrifice. Some people make sacrifices. Some people make commitments. Yeah. I try not to use the word sacrifice. It's a sacrifice. You got to sacrifice. I said, no, you have to commit. To me, it was just a commitment to learning all that I could. I'm like, okay, listen, I'm putting Cokes in the refrigerator here. Where's this going to lead to? And it led to an assistant coaching job there. So I went from the Chargers to the Saints to the 49ers. Then I finally got a head job with the Falcons. And when I got that head job, because I'd done every single step that you could do to get there, I was just like you, I was prepared. I'd gone through the process. I didn't try to skip any steps. My goal every day was to be the first in, the last out, hoard information, learn everything, ask questions when I was in a position, where I wasn't going to bother anybody, and it paid off for me. So,
as you then come full circle, and now you become the UCLA head coach, and again, this is where I think, from my perspective, like sitting back and watching this, that your effect on younger kids, coming out of high school, being able to mentor them before they go off in the NFL and they're making money and all those things, really paid a lot of dividends. And I know from my perspective, because I was around there all the time, I traveled to just about every single game, both at home and away, that there were a lot of kids. And one of the kids, when you were talking earlier about Cody, who's now lost 200 pounds plus, right?
Yeah,
and now
he's
the Navy
defending our country, and we love it that he is.
Yeah, no, there's a really defining moment. And it was, I mean, and I got to know the family really well, as did my daughter Claudette, the Pasquale family, right?
Yeah.
And so if you could quickly tell the story about Nick and how that all played out, because I think, there's one thing, there's all this pressure on at the college level to win. And in your circumstance, certainly you were there to win, but there was also a bigger picture, and the bigger picture included, if you're up by a certain amount, the value that these kids can get, because you're at one point,
I was a walk-on.
You're a walk-on, and you became a scholarship player early on. But you understood what it was to be in that walk-on locker room and get everybody else's, second shoes.
When I first went to Washington, you guys all had a locker. I had a hook.
Yeah.
Okay, I had a hook in that other locker room. I didn't have a locker. I got one after my, fall of my freshman year. But coaching changed dramatically for me when I went to UCLA. The purpose of my coaching, the purpose in the pros was only to win. That's all that they cared about in the pros. And the definition of winning was winning the game on Sunday. The definition of winning for me changed when I went to UCLA. And certainly it was winning on the field, because winning on the field allows you to continue to do what you love to do, which is coach these young men and help them in life. But it also became about these young men getting an education and graduating, which is two different things. Forcing them to get an education is different than them just graduating. Some of them can skate through and graduate, but I wanted them to develop a passion beyond football. And then the third thing was to help them become the young men that their parents always dreamed that they'd be. As a parent, we all see the future for our children, and I felt like it was my duty to make sure that I did all that I could to enforce those standards on the young child, or on the young player, that their parents had always enforced on them, and help them become a great man, and then to have a job that they were passionate about when they got out of college, to be good husbands, good fathers, good brothers, all those things. So I had a different perspective than a lot of coaches. A lot of coaches, it was win, like you said, on the field, score as many points as we can. And you see it all the time now. You see these scores of 77, 80 to 3, or 80 to 7, or 80 to nothing. Well, I never believed in that. I believed in that rewarding the young men on our team that didn't get to play unless the game was out of reach. And you talk about Nick Pasquale, who was a young walk-on, just fierce competitor, just awesome. I mean, he was a 5'9", undersized, under-talented, but overly tough receiver.
He was a little bit of a Rudy.
He was very much like Rudy, and everybody respected him. We had these great players, Anthony Barr and Eric Kendricks, who are both in the Pro Bowl this year, who would knock the snot out of Nick on crossing routes on the scout team. He'd get up and throw the ball at him and say, "That didn't hurt. You can't hurt me." And they ended up, they loved this kid. Well, we were playing Houston Nick's sophomore year, and I got to know his family really well. And Nick's dream was to play on the grass at the Rose Bowl. And we got a lead on Houston, and I was able to put him in the game because once it was secure, I was going to clear the bench because I was the walk-on. Man, I just wanted a taste of the game, you know? And so I realized how important it was for these kids that were always out there sacrificing, like Nick, getting the crud kicked out of him in practice to get to actually go and play in a game. So Nick gets to play in a game. We win the game, obviously. The next week we have a bye. Nick goes home to San Clemente. He's with his brother, AJ. They go out to a party. Nick has a couple drinks, and being smart, doing what he should do, he throws his keys to his brother and says, "I'm going to walk home." As he's walking home, he steps off the curb, he gets hit by a car, and he gets killed. And it was traumatic, and it was awful, and it was awful. But it taught me a lesson, and it created a saying that we used at UCLA, and I will use whenever I coach again, and it was play for each other's dreams. It was up to guys like Anthony Barr and Brett Hundley and Eric Kendricks and Jonathan Franklin and, the great players that went on to play in the NFL. It was up to them to play to a standard that allowed us to get a lead against teams that we should get a lead against so that the other kids could realize their dreams, the Nick Pasquales could realize their dreams. And so we'd always say that we got to play for each other's dreams, not just play for each other, play for each other's dreams. Play to your standard every single game so that Nick Pasquale can get in and play a play. I had a guy named, we call him, remember Sunshine?
Yeah.
Okay. He's another wide receiver. He's from Colorado. he got in for 13 plays one game when we were way ahead. I get a text at 2 a.m. It's from Sunshine. He says, I haven't taken a shower yet. I haven't gone to sleep yet. I don't want to wipe the sweat off of my body. I want to thank you so much for getting me in the game. And my response was, thank your teammates. They're the ones that got you in the game. So that's kind of the story of Nick Pasquale.
Well, again, it's I know each one of those kids that you're talking about, not Cody, but the other two. And, the bottom line is those kids, even though they were never going to be great players, they were going to maximize their own potential.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, they went through the process because they love the sport of football. And I think, you recognizing that there's a way that you could facilitate that opportunity for them meant absolutely everything. I want to switch over to something. There's a guy that we all know that passed away tragically, and his daughter and I think 8 other people recently, Kobe Bryant. And there was a Kobe Bryant top 10 rules for success. And I want to go through these, and I want to talk about, after we go through. So number 1, have a champion's mentality. Number 2, outwork your potential. Number 3, learn from failures. 4, be a long-term thinker. That's really key. 5, find your passion. 6, challenge yourself to grow. 7, keep going. 8, protect your dreams. 9, be driven. And 10, achieve greatness. And I think greatness, is relative to everybody.
Of those 9, right?
That is the benefit of those.
Can
9s.
I go back to 1? Because this is Mark's, just for those that are listening. Since I've known Mark, he has said one thing to everyone. I've heard him say it to his daughters more than anyone. Because Kobe says, what is number 1?
Have a
Champion's mentality.
Yep.
So Mark forever has said, it takes a little more to make a champion, which was champion gear. That was their saying for so long. And that's always been Mark's number 1 thing. It takes a little more to make a champion. So I think it's really interesting that that's Kobe's, number 1 rule for success. And, a champion's mentality means doing things that others won't. It means being fully committed. There's different levels of commitment. There's someone that's fully committed. There's conveniently committed. There's partially committed. But having a champion's mentality, that means no matter what, no matter why, no matter how, no matter what the circumstances, you are committed to being a champion.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because when I can't tell you. So one thing I don't want to have somebody that's listening to this podcast right now walk away with, and that is the whole notion that I wake up every single morning, jacked up, super motivated, running out the door, right? But what I do have is I have a vision board, and I do have the discipline that, because if I don't accomplish the task at hand, and having a big goal that's already out there, like Mount Everest, and again, it can be any goal. It could be I had Mark Allen on last week, the 6-time Ironman world champion, incredible. And you don't have to be at that level. But if you're not committed, I love that word that you use, if you're not committed to the task at hand, then you just let those goals or that thing that you need to do that day to make you better at whatever you're trying to do, you find a reason not to do it.
You're so right. Okay, here's a great saying for you that says exactly what you're saying. You won't always be motivated. That is when you need to be disciplined.
Yeah.
You're not going to wake up every day motivated. You don't, but I'm, you're my best buddy and all that. And I'm not on this podcast to pump you up, but I am to tell people the truth about you. You have a unique discipline, a very unique discipline, and look back and have a champion's mentality. You have that towards everything that you do, and it's genuine. And that's why I know that you're going to be successful, because it comes from the right place. It comes from John Wooden's definition of success. And you're not doing this for anybody but yourself. You're doing it so that you know that you've done all you can to be the very best that you can become. That's my outside perception of why you do what you do.
So there's an interesting little story that you were involved in this last summer. And, we look back at it now and kind of chuckle, but I don't believe that you can be mentally strong without being physically strong.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so that to me is like the whole secret. You got to put yourself physically strong because you're going to have all these things that hit you left and right. There's going to be adversity. There's going to be death in the family. There's going to be these separations. There's going to be job training. There's all this stuff that's on the board. And you have to physically put yourself so you can mentally take this on. Jim and I were invited this last summer to go climb Mount Rainier. And I was asked to co-guide along with this other guy, and this other guy was bringing this Navy SEAL who's a stud. And his whole business now is, after being a SEAL, and then going on into life, has been about doing these boot camps and these things of inspiration. And so he's come out with books and tapes, and you can actually go to a boot camp and you go through like a 3-day little mini buds type thing. And so a couple of these guys that he brought along are guys who have studied his books, studied his tapes, but have not gone through the physical discipline of making themselves tough, right? And so now we're on Mount Rainier, and somehow or another, Jim and I got stuck with this guy I was leading. Jim was in the end of the rope, and there's this other guy who's in between. And he kept telling us about the 9 principles or something of being tough and everything else, but he hadn't done the work, and so he wasn't physically ready to take on the adversity that hit. And by the time we got to about 12,500 feet, there's a big rock you have to climb. At the top of that, he was down on all fours, throwing up. We had to go back, and the right thing to do is take him back down the mountain. He was in really, really bad shape, and he was whining and crying and everything else, but he wasn't mentally tough. He hadn't, those things that you were talking about, commitment and discipline, he hadn't gone through that because he was trying to take the shortcut of just sitting back in his couch and listening to a tape. And that, to me, is not the way that you ultimately accomplish great things.
No, it's taking those principles and putting them into action. I mean, it's like you said, action creates reaction. Well, he listened to the principles. He thought he understood them. He probably understood them, but he never applied them. He never applied them to his life. And he was woefully unprepared to be in the position he was in. We knew that he was physically unprepared, but even if he was physically unprepared, if he was mentally prepared, if he'd at least done some of the work, all he had to do, Mark, is stand up. And we kept telling him, stand up and take a step. And I think that's so important to so many people, is just take the next step. Just keep walking, just keep breathing, keep hoping, and you'll get where you're supposed to be, and that's number 7 on Kobe's thing. Just keep going. I mean, you're going to get hit with adversity. You're going to get hit right in the face with things that challenge you on a daily basis, and you can either turn around or you can keep going. Now, I'm going to just stop here for a second with this keep going, and I'm going to share everyone that's listening that as dedicated as Mark is to keep going, when he's on Mount Everest, he's going to be listening to Garrett Madison. If Garrett Madison at some point says, Mark...
Who's the expedition leader?
He's the expedition leader and one of the great mountain climbers, says, Mark, it's time to turn around, then Mark will turn around. So just everyone know that. But he's going to keep going as long as he can keep going.
I want to talk about what happened last year, because a lot of people have a lot of concern about my safety and everything else, and they saw the long lines and they go, oh my God, it's so crowded up there. And so I want to explain how this works.
Right.
Okay. So what happens is March 30th, I am going to be leaving from LAX and flying to Kathmandu. Once we get there and we gather and we organize, we will be launching from there around the 2nd of April, 3rd or 4th of April, and we will be starting our trek up to Everest Base Camp. Essentially, you're climbing about, it's just trekking, but you're going through all these different tea huts and these camps and everything else, going from about 8,000 feet roughly up to 17,500 feet. And what that is doing is it's building your endurance. More importantly, it's building more red blood cells in your body. So the red blood cells are what carries oxygen around your body, so you can acclimate to that. So now this is the beginning of April. Once we get to Everest Base Camp, we're going to be going up through the Kumba ice fields and back down to Camp 1, to Camp 2, to Camp 3. And you keep kind of pushing yourself in terms of how far up the mountain you can go. So your body is like, okay, now we're going to a little bit higher height. And so what happened last year is that in the springtime, traditionally, there's about a 12-day window where the jet stream goes, which, it's flowing up there 200-300 miles per hour today, where the jet stream actually rises above 29,029 feet and allows, relatively speaking, safe passage for you to get to the top and the bottom and back down. And what happened last year is the jet stream only rose for about 2 days versus 12. And so rather than have a bunch of groups spread out over this 12-day period, everybody got summit fever because they're like, we got to go for it because, we're not going to get another opportunity. You pay all this money. And everybody ran up there on the same day, at the same hour, at the same time. And there was also a lot of non-qualified climbers that should not have been there, along with the outfitters that should not have been allowed to climb through the Nepalese government. And so I'll be climbing from the south. And so the hope this year is that the jet stream rises and we've got a nice 12-day calm, sunny weather window. And that we don't see that type. The other thing that they've done too is that the Nepalese government also issued some new requirements that you have to have these. You have to have bagged X amount of peaks, and in order to make it to the top. So they've done a better job of vetting, but Mother Nature also plays into this as well. And so knock on wood that things are going to go in the right way.
They will. And you'll make good decisions. And I think a lot of people got the wrong idea of Everest when they looked at that picture like you did. I mean, the window was so short last year that everyone just had to go for it. And I don't think it'll be that way this year at all.
One thing I want to talk about now is, and again, going back to Kobe's top 10 rules for success, is learn from failures. Because again, I don't think anybody that I know, and I know like a lot of successful people, they don't become successful without having a bunch of bumps and falling off the horse and having to get back on. And from you, you've been fired from
Atlanta, Seattle, and UCLA.
Yep. And so that's not a fun thing. And I've been there with you. It's awful. And
it's very public too.
It's very public. And so not only are you having to go through that in the public eye, but you're trying to internalize it. And now what? And every single time you go, you're going to a whole new city. And again, it gets back to uncertainty. But again, going back to what are the things that you can control?
Well,
right?
Here's what I think it's human nature when you have a failure. And I'll just relate it to my job. When you're a football coach and someone fires you, is your first instinct is to find someone to blame to relieve the angst that you feel. It was their fault. It was their fault. It was, why'd they do this? That was a bad decision. And that is not productive at all. That is counterproductive. And I think we all go through it, but the quicker you can get through that and then turn the attention towards yourself and say, okay, what decisions did I make that led to this failure? Or how did I not prepare? Or where did I get off track? Or where did I lose my focus? And then from there, you say, okay, now how can I avoid doing that again? Or where do I need to put my focus? Where do I need to put my energy and my time? And the faster you can change the narrative from it's somebody else's fault to it's my responsibility to learn from this and grow from this and apply the lessons the next time I get a chance, then the more successful you're going to be. I think the people that continue to fail or never recover from failure are those that are looking for an excuse, or they're looking to blame somebody else. And look, I still have moments where I go, well, if this guy hadn't done this, but those moments are fleeting. And even when I have those moments, I know deep down, this is not productive. This is not the most productive way to think. What could I have done better? And I know, and it's not just, Mark, as you know, you write a lot of stuff down. It's not just thinking about them. It's about writing them down, reviewing them, and then applying them the next opportunity you get.
Well, one of the things I know you've done, and again, it goes back to all the principles that we're talking about, is you continue to get out there with me. I mean, I want to train. I mean, beyond the fact that we have everything in common, it's awesome to have a training partner out there. And so I wouldn't necessarily, I drag you along for a lot of stuff because a lot of times you're dragging me along for a lot of this, but the bottom line was we're pushing each other, and that's the key.
Yeah.
And again, as I just had mentioned, I think creating a strong body, which you do, and I do, creates a strong mind of helping you overcome these obstacles when you have all this self-doubt, right? And you have the fear and you have uncertainty. And And you can't control many of the things that are out there. You can't control when you're going to get your next coaching gig. Right now, of course, you're a college football analyst for ESPN. You do a fantastic job there. You could have a whole new career if you wanted to go and continue down that path, and maybe that's the path that you'll be on. But on the other hand, the amount of impact that you can have by, again, following the process, loving the process, being mentally strong, taking these lessons that you talked about from failure, converting them into what it takes to be successful, and then mentoring these kids with having a very disciplined structure, I think is your calling card, and the future. But the best thing you can do is put yourself in the best position of success to make those things happen.
Right. I agree. If I get another shot, which hopefully I do, and hopefully it's in college, what's always important to me is to be able to take the lessons that I've learned and share them with the student athletes that are 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 years old and are starting to go through or have gone through or will go through some of the things that I've gone through. And I've always been very open with the players about the challenges that I've had in my life. And I know that they're going to face them, and talking openly about how I've handled them correctly and incorrectly and what I think is the best way to move forward. And as I said, it's not to wallow in self-pity, but it's to take action. And that's what I encourage them to do as well.
So before you came over here, one of my favorite musical artists, I think you've met him actually. You were on stage with him last year, Tim McGraw.
That's my man.
Yeah, Tim.
He's great.
Yeah. I mean, gosh,
what a magnetic personality. So I met him at the NFL draft, and then I went on stage and threw footballs with him to like 200,000 people in Nashville. Yeah, but I spent a couple hours with him before his show, and he's a Louisiana guy, so he loves the Saints. So he loved my dad, and that was a kind of an opening. And he was so fun to talk to because he had just great energy, a real positivity about him. He's a workout fanatic. He can't go on stage unless he's done about a 3-hour workout before. He's one of those guys. I mean, you'd love him. Yeah. He's awesome.
Well, where I was going with that is he's got this song that I was listening to called Live Like You're Dying, right? And so he talks about Rocky Mountain climbing. He talks about riding a bull named Fu Manchu. He talks about skydiving and all that kind of stuff. And, I mean, if you really think about it, if the doctor came up to you and said, Jim, Mark, you've got, 3 months to live or something, and, how would you redefine your life? Right.
Yeah.
And I think, that moment happened to me again, going back to, 8 years ago now when I was at that moment of truth. Like,
it's been a long time.
It doesn't seem like it because, I've been all over the world now in every continent. And now I'm going to go to my final continent, Asia, and fly into Nepal and take on Everest. But again, I said this about 30 minutes ago about stepping into the fear because I had no idea what to expect. And it's scary taking on these big mountains and how you're going to do that. And I'd never done that. I climbed a lot with you, but those were all more in the Cascade. Out of Seattle and Santa Monica, California. And so to take that on. And so I always really embrace that song because of what it says. And they're not just words, and they're cool words. It's a cool song. But I think it really has made an impact and a difference. And I every once in a while I do these posts on my social media, and people go, "Mark, you're so inspirational." And I don't think I'm inspirational. I'm just the guy that got out of bed to go do something, right? And anybody who gets out of bed, and anybody can go climb a mountain, knit a blanket. I mean, there are so many different ways that other people can see that is inspirational, and that's just about the thing that you started the pod with. Action creates reaction.
Yeah, and making a commitment.
And making that commitment.
And every day, recommitting. And that's what you do. And that's why you're, standing on the porch here about ready to go up Everest and have a successful climb. And it'll be fun to see what the next goal is, because I know that for everyone listening, this isn't it. You're not just going to go to the top of Everest and come down and go, okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
You know, there's new challenges on the horizon, and I think that's how successful people think is what. Okay, I've done this. Now, what's my next passion? I think it all comes down to your passion too. You know, it's like you talked about. You know, the guy that died on Everest. What was his name?
Don
again?
Cash.
Don. I mean, I'm not sure that it was his passion.
It wasn't.
It was something he wanted to do,
Yeah.
not something that he had to do or needed to do for self-fulfillment. And for me, when I watch you, this has been a real, like, self-reflective, as I've said, spiritual journey for you to, I don't want to sound corny, but like this enlightening thing. It's changed you, but it came from the right place, and you're fully committed to it.
Yeah, you know, I think one of the things with that too is that when you go out into nature,
Yeah.
and you have to unplug your phone because there's no cell coverage, and you're out there with a bunch of trees and rabbits and coyote and grass and river flying through, and that's one of the reasons why both of us got super committed and moved to Sun Valley, Idaho. It has had a huge impact on the way that I've really helped process the pain and other things. I watched some stupid show last night, and they were talking about, you know, this drug and that drug, about so much anxiety in the society and depression and all this kind of stuff. I'm not saying that those things aren't real, but again, I think that if you sit in your apartment and you do nothing, you don't get out in nature and you don't embrace that, and you can really process those feelings and everything else that we all have, I think it's very difficult to kind of emerge out of that without having some artificial pill, you know, going down your mouth to help, you know, compensate that. So everybody's got their own way of doing it, but like you said, the thing that is, I think that is probably opened my eyes more than anything is connecting the past of the discipline that I learned with Coach James, then stepping into the fear and being on this amazing journey has really taught me about continue to set not goals, but big, hairy, audacious goals
Yeah.
that are out there that are going to be a push, that are going to make me go outside my comfort zone, that really push me in the way that I need to be pushed, to keep that fire of, you know, getting out of bed every morning. And what's the next thing? A lot of people said, "Okay, Mark, this is your last one." It's not my last one.
Right.
Actually, it's just getting me going.
Right.
And so I'm not exactly sure what that's going to be. I mean, I've got some ideas, but like, you know, the old football season, you know, one play at a time, one game at a time, right?
Yeah, that's where you put your focus on in the moment that you're in, and I think that's probably what you find in the mountain. I know that's for me what I find. Like yesterday when we were going up, and I was behind you on that hill, and I'm like, God, I just want to turn around. I just want to turn around. I just want to turn around. I go, no, I got to just take one more step. 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 And then we get to that cat track, and you say to me, okay, that was the hardest part. You know, now we got it. Well, there were still hard parts, but it's like Kobe said, just keep going. You know, just keep going. Just take another step. Take another step. Because I think every time we go out and climb or skin or snowshoe, I have moments where I'm like, God, okay, I just want to turn around. And then you take a step, and then you take a step, and then you take a step, and then you're at the top, and you're rewarded. And yeah, it's just it's an incredible feeling. It's an incredible feeling. So
yeah. So you know, you sent me a quote, which you do from time to time, and you said that the best 7 doctors. Ready?
did I send you that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I like
Sunshine,
that.
number 1. 2, air. 3, exercise. 4, water. 5, diet. 6, rest. 7, probably the most important one, is laughter.
Yeah.
Right. And those are really, I think, the recipe to having a successful life, right? It's not about a financial win. It's about really incorporating those 7 different things into your life and giving you a reason to get out of bed. So what I wanted to do is have this podcast prior to launching to Everest.
Right.
Anybody that's listening, I want you to know that this is my passion. This is my drive. I'm so jacked up. I've done all the work. There's nobody who's worked harder at preparing themselves for this challenge than me. I'm not saying that there's not others who've challenged and worked as hard, but being fully committed, moving to Sun Valley, being at 6,000 feet, working out twice a day, getting after it, doing all the things I need to do, the equipment, the nutrition, all the stuff that all count towards making something successful or not. I've fully immersed myself into. So,
and going uphill. See, you've been going uphill.
Going up at steep hills.
Steep hills.
Yeah.
And it was funny the other day when we went, I think it was when we skinned up and we were at the top, and I think we did 3,300 vertical feet. And you said that's more than, I'll do every day on Everest except for summit day, right?
Yeah.
Or close. Now, we're not at 20,000 feet, but you're going uphill.
Yeah.
So
it's all relative.
I love going uphill. You love going uphill. I mean, going uphill gives us a sense of satisfaction and reward, I think. And I think that's kind of what life's all about. There was a guy named Jim Finks. You remember Jim Finks?
Yeah, general manager of the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, and he gave my dad this saying once, this little piece of paper, and I still have it actually, and it's really worn out, but it says, does the road wind uphill? And it's kind of a rhetorical question, and the answer is yes, to the very end.
Yeah.
And that's what life's about, and it's going uphill, and challenging yourself. And successful people, I think, relish that challenge. I think it gives them a peace of mind that is really healthy. And I think, I know when you and I go uphill and we get to the top, there's a real calm, it's not necessarily a feeling of accomplishment. It's just a feeling of reward, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I love that. And it's a good place to probably end. So this is what we're committed to. This is what we're absolutely committed to, is that when I get off the top and back down safely, we're going to have another catch up about talking about what happened. I can guarantee there's going to be adversity that's up there and persevering through all that kind of stuff, and what that was like being in the death zone above 26,000 feet and what others experienced. So it's going to be a fascinating conversation. So first of all, thank you, Jim Mora, for being on the pod. Number two is, again, if you want to go find and follow the journey, go to my website, www.markpattisonnfl.com, and you can do so. And on that note, thank you for everybody for listening. I'm super grateful, and look forward to getting re-caught up via the pod post my Everest, hopefully, successful summit.
It will be successful.
All right, man.
And what makes it successful is that we get to have another conversation.
That's right.
Get your butt back down.
All right. Right on. Take care. Hey, and thank you so much for listening to the Find Your Summit podcast. We are so glad to have you along for this journey. And if you enjoy the show, please tell a friend, share it on iTunes, spread it to the planet. We're looking to broadcast this to every person that is out there because, as you know, everybody has their own summit that they're going after. Okay, if you're looking to follow my journey, you can find that through my social links on markpattissonnfl.com. That's Mark, M-A-R-K, Pattison, P-A-T-T-I-S-O-N, NFL.com. So, until the next podcast, just remember, clear eyes, full hearts, and remember, it takes a little more to make a champion, so make it happen. Thank you. Bye.